Welcome back. We're discussing U.S. President Barack Obama's decision to restart military tribunals for Guantanamo Bay detainees as Washington continues to be politically charged over the debate of what to do with the prisoners. Joining me from Los Angeles is David Kaye, Executive Director of the UCLA School of Law's International Human Rights Program. Prior to an academic career, he was a State Department staff lawyer with responsibility for the law of war. Here with me in the studio is Cully Stimson, the Senior Legal Fellow at the Center for Legal and Judicial Studies at the Heritage Foundation. Before that, he was Deputy Assistant Defense Secretary for Detainee Affairs. Before we get back to our discussion, let's see the results of our chatroom poll, where we asked, do you think President Obama can keep his promise to close Guantanamo by 2010? Now, 55% of you said yes, while 45% of you said no. As we get back to our discussion, Professor, you wanted to follow up on some of the points we made just before the break when it came to the issue of the detainees and the image of Guantanamo Bay, or the image of America following Guantanamo Bay.
Well, the only point that I wanted to make there, and again, I think this is something that Cully and I appear to agree on, and it was raised by the last caller, is, you know, there's an issue of the symbolic import and the symbolism of Guantanamo, which is separate in a way from some of the legal issues that we might be concerned about. So the Obama administration is pushing forward to make the military commissions maybe more palatable, but there's really a broader question as to whether the administration really does need to make a clean break, both with Guantanamo and with the military commissions, as a matter of signaling really to the rest of the world and to the American people that we are making a sort of charting a new policy ahead on detention affairs.
Naveed's on the line from the United Kingdom. Naveed, go ahead. Thanks for your patience.
Hello. I was just commenting, as you have already said, most of the callers have pointed this out, that at the beginning of President Obama's presidency, there was great optimism that this was going to be a new phase in America. I think that it is more important for America rather than anyone else or any other country that they should close down this scar which is on their personality, which is on the personality of America, for example, which was the champion of human rights. Right. And I unfortunately, yesterday's announcement that he was going to restart some of the trials has poured cold water on that optimism.
Right. Naveed, I want to put something to Cully Stimson, because he's very much in the thick of things and knows a lot of what's going on, especially now, the issue of the standoff that's taking place with some lawmakers and politicians saying, we're not going to release the $80 million you need to relocate these to President Obama because they're worried about some of the detainees going on to domestic soil. And we had an email about this from Michael Anderson in Oregon in the USA, who said the detainees will be shipped out to some other black facility and forgotten about by the majority of Americans. Now, what do you suggest as far as how things move forward? If we've got people who are opposed to the idea, and it could be quite a standoff in the administration here.
Yeah, the $80 million that the administration requested to close Guantanamo is money they clearly think they need. But I would respectfully say that this isn't about money. It has created a political problem that isn't really necessary, because having worked on these issues, the Defense Department has a huge budget. And they could send a couple, 3 planes down there and move them to secure facilities in the United States. Now, it would be a little bit irresponsible to do it that way, but it is not necessarily going to take $80 million. And I think what you see is a not in my backyard problem. Right. Probably the biggest one we've seen in a long time, as we call it NIMBY in the United States. And so there's political posturing, which I have no taste for. And then there's the security and legal framework question, which I think David and I and others have worked on for a long time. And that's a separate matter, and I wish we could push the politics to the side and focus on the very real security threats, and then the rule of law and the moral issue involved.
Mm-hmm. Professor Kaye, isn't there going to be a race against time for Barack Obama if he's planning to achieve a closure by 2010? He's got 241 or so detainees he has to deal with. Can he beat the clock?
Well, he's sure going to try to do that. He's actually appointed somebody at the State Department who's sort of the point person right now in order to work with our allies around the world in order to take some of those detainees back to their home countries or to other countries. There's also this question that your email correspondent mentioned, which is, could these detainees go elsewhere if Congress really refuses to allow the administration in some political way to bring them into the United States. And we do have other facilities, not black facilities, but facilities at Bagram in Afghanistan. I think some of the concern that these individuals would come to the United States, I think there may be equal or even greater concerns if they don't come to the United States once Guantanamo closes. But you're absolutely right. The clock is ticking, and I think that President Obama is going to do everything he can to meet the timetable he set for the administration.
Well, Yusuf's on the line. It's good to hear from South Africa. Go ahead, Yusuf.
Okay, my comment is this. Why can't the American government be more transparent on the prisoners based in Guantanamo Bay? Why can't they give the prisoners the right to express their views, to actually see what they're going through?
Okay, actually, let me put this to Carly Stimson. This is an interesting issue. A lot of people have said, of course, they've had no voice. Their views haven't been heard. How much has things changed for them under the Obama administration? I mean, how much have their rights improved?
Hardly at all. I would respectfully suggest to this caller, and I appreciate the question, that the conditions of detention at Guantanamo are no longer the issue, and they haven't been for some time. Most of the world doesn't realize that almost every world network and even lesser network and journalists, print and otherwise, have been to Guantanamo numerous times.
I guess it's more an issue of whether or not their stories can be heard, in the sense that you know, how they were picked up and so on, rather than their treatment.
Yeah. Well, each of the detainees went through several administrative hearings, the big one called the Combatant Status Review Tribunal. Many of those transcripts are available online. They're long and boring, but you can read them. There are classified portions that are blacked out for national security reasons, but also their lawyers can certainly talk about their conditions of detention and speak on their behalf, and they have in court so far. But I suspect as we see these commissions to be revived, you're going to hear more and more from the detainees themselves.
One thing also to ask you is about the issue that's raised now with Nancy Pelosi, whether or not she knew about the interrogation techniques. That she said she wasn't briefed, the intelligence agency said. How important is it to get the resolution on that debate?
I think that is mainly a political issue, a sort of gotcha moment that the Republicans are using to cudgel her over the head with it and say, hey, you were briefed on this, you knew about it, you said nothing, therefore silence is consent. I don't like politics. I don't like the politics of Guantanamo. I like the law and the legal framework and the law of war and the criminal law issues. But look, I've briefed Congress on sensitive matters related to Guantanamo. Trust me, Riz, when I say something they don't like behind closed doors, I get an earful. I'm sure David's been in the same situation before. So to think that Nancy Pelosi sat there and then didn't say anything and didn't write any letters and somebody else wrote a letter later on tells me that either she wasn't listening, maybe she was asleep, I don't know what was going on, but it's a political issue that is being used against the Democrats and especially her right now.
Well, we've got a caller on the line.
I think that it's not...
Oh, go ahead, Professor.
Yeah, if I could just jump in there. I think relating to the last caller's question, first of all, I don't think it's clear what Nancy Pelosi was actually briefed on yet. So I'm not really quite prepared to say what she knew. And she's talked about openness, about transparency, which is one of the issues that the caller mentioned. And I think that the idea of a commission that actually looks back and sees, you know, how did the torture policies actually develop, who was responsible, is something that she said she favors now, and in a way that would take it out of the politics for some time and put it into some professional hands. The other thing is, on the conditions, I agree totally with Cully that the issue isn't the conditions at Guantanamo per se, but there is an issue about long-term detention for these individuals, some of whom are held in isolation for extended periods of time. And even though they're getting their 3 meals, they're able to practice their religion and to do other things that we think obviously are important. You know, there's still a long-term detention issue here that really does go to the sort of the fact of their very detention.
We've got about half a minute, Mr. Secretary. I just want to ask what you think there will be in terms of accountability in the long run, and whether the lesson of Guantanamo will ever change things in the way the U.S. does business in the future.
Well, I hope it does. I hope the mistakes that the Bush administration or any administration in place at the time would have made are learned, that we can move forward. Clearly, this president wants to move forward, not look backwards. That's why he's been against a quote-unquote truth commission. I think we should judge this president on their actions. not their words, their actions, and he's continuing, I believe, to make the country safe through his actions, and that's a good thing.
All right. Well, I want to thank you very much, and Professor, thank you as well for joining us for this debate.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Glad to be here.
And thanks for being with us. On the next show, has the economic downturn resulted in a shift in global power, with rising economies gaining more clout? I'm joined by Dr. Fang Gang, a key economic advisor to the Chinese government. But from me and the team, we'll see you next time.